Today we are visiting Prince Edward Island at the far end of Canada's eastern coast. It is the smallest province of Canada, but it is also the most densely populated one. You will find sandy beaches, romantic villages, and, as we love, history and frightening but exciting stories about shipwrecks. We dive into the adventure of the tall ship Marco Polo, who was wrecked on the beach by Cavendish in a 2 days terrible storm. My name is Michael Schutte and thank you for watching Painting the Island. Hello and welcome in my studio. Today we are staring into the big white nothing, but that is gonna change. We're gonna paint a sunset above the beach near Cavendish, where the Marco Polo stranded so many years ago in a terrible storm. And as always, we have a lot to do, so at work. We're gonna create an after-storm sunset with lots of clouds. We start with a warm glow on the horizon, so we mix yellow dark with alizarin crimson and make 3 different tones with titanium white. And you cannot see it because we only see the upper part of the canvas, but we choose for a high horizon. Very important. With the 1-inch brush, we make crisscross strokes above the horizon. Now be advised, it's gonna get ugly, and that's always the case when we start a foundation for a sky. And we can mix phthalo blue with a little touch of cadmium yellow and titanium white for the second layer, and I always make 3 tones. Just very simple by adding white. Then I start with the lightest, and with no pressure on the bristles, we can go a bit downwards over the first horizon layer to create a soft gradient, and that is really important. And we can do the same with the third layer and try to make the same gradient. You don't want to see lines in your sky. And sorry, I go a bit fast forward because this is not the most interesting part of the painting. And if you painted with me before, and we do this now already 7-8 years, you saw me doing this a couple of times before, I think. The Dutch masters used this formula again and again to have a steady underlayer for any sky they wanted to create. From here we can make it in a storm sky, thunderstorm, sunny skies, and whatever is possible. Or better said, whatever comes up in your mind. Now this sunset is situated on a beach, and as I live near a beach, I take tons of photos wherever I can as a reference. But if you live in a city, you can find thousands of photos on Google or special sites for artist reference photos, which is really very handy. And oh, I almost forgot, in the top layer I add a bit of purple. Not too much, just to make it a bit darker. Above the horizon I'm gonna add a bit more light orange, just for the glow. And on the horizon we can paint a few low hills just to see how the orange is melting in for the color balance. Sounds very complicated and like a mouthful, but if you see it you will understand. If you don't do it, then the white of the blank canvas keeps annoying. And that's not what we want. And I think if I see the combination it looks pretty good, and then we can move forward with the clouds. Then we can start fantasizing about the clouds. I start with a very soft purple, pushing the bristles into the wet paint. I found the 1-inch brush from Uncle Bob a bit too big and too rough, so now I use a soft filbert brush. and with no pressure we let the lower part of the cloud melt into the wet underlayer. And because of the round top of the filbert, it will melt into each other, which works great. Then we have to start fantasizing how we're gonna build up the clouds. And it's always good to start with a few small ones and let them overlap by a few bigger ones on the top. This optical trick will work great in the composition. It will give the viewers the idea and the feeling that they look into the painting and not to a flat wall. And if we go further ahead, pay attention how colors suddenly seem to change with the growing clouds. And this is how colors influence each other. The background color of the first sky layer seems to glow, and the red-orange glow on the horizon seems to change also. And this is something to keep in mind when you set up a sky. Very important are the crisscross brushstrokes in the background. They will cause a kind of lively sky where already something is happening, even without any clouds. Think about this. It's very seldom that a sky is completely still blue without any movement. Maybe on a very sunny day, but we painters, we don't like that. No, we like dramatic skies with tons of interesting, heavy, threatening clouds who can burst out in a terrible rainstorm. Yes, I know it sounds very dramatic, but a painting needs some tension or excitement. Although, let's put it this way, you need to tell a story with your painting, otherwise it's just another boring, maybe beautiful picture. And here is the force or power of the old masters. Those guys knew how to build up tension and adventure in their paintings. And if you want to study some sea painters, well, check out The Raft of the Méduse by sea painter Theodore Gillicolt. It was pretty oversized, 16 feet times 23 feet. And if you want to see it, you have to visit the Louvre in Paris. It tells the story of a French naval frigate, Méduse, which ran aground on the coast of Mauritania on July 2nd in the year 1816. 147 sailors set adrift on a hurriedly constructed raft in a wild sea, and I can tell you that the ending was pretty dramatic. The event became a scandal as the cause was attributed to the incompetence of the French captain. The composition itself is a masterpiece, and it shows the drama but also the new hope as the guys on top discover a tall ship in the distance at the horizon. At the end they were saved, but paying a high price. So yes, we can say that this painting tells a story. Traveling overseas has always been a risky adventure and still is. We consider the 20,000 shipwrecks for the east coast of Canada. Wow, that is a lot. And we are back in the safe and warm studio where we paint the big clouds floating above the coast of Cavendish, peaceful and calm after the big storm. Although that is what we will fantasize and make it all happen. We are painting and telling a piece of history to honor all the brave souls who were not afraid to discover new lands and experiencing exciting adventures. And while I was telling this story, we went to the right side of our painting and we painted a few huge clouds for a great perspective illusion. Then, considering that the light comes from below as the sun is sinking into the sea, we can give the clouds a kind of reflection where we think it's necessary. And if the paint is not too thick and muddy, we can keep going with decorating the clouds. Further away from the sun, higher up, and the sun we still don't see, pay attention to that, but we will paint him later above the horizon, I promise. We make the orange a bit weaker, but closer by, so lower to the horizon, we can be a bit more aggressive. We can even add some silver linings with the highlight tone. And this time we better mix the titanium white with a little tip of dark yellow hue. This pigment has a good amount of orange in it, so that will work great in sunsets. Now see if you like it, and otherwise wait till it gets dry enough to move on. However, with this wet in wet technique, it should work. And this might be another good advice: don't put too much paint at your first layer. All we can do then is blend the clouds in with a very soft clean brush and let the sky dry. It's time to paint the beach, but first I want to tell you about the story of the Marco Polo. Have fun and enjoy.
Welcome in my workroom. Let me tell you about the history of that most famous shipwreck of Prince Edward Island, the Marco Polo. We have to go back in time to the year 1851, when it was launched by the Smith Shipbuilders of St. John in New Brunswick.
In July 1883, the Marco Polo sailed from Montreal to England loaded with pine needles, but it was caught in a severe storm in the Gulf of Lawrence and it began to leak. After 2 days of heavy storm, the crew had to give up. Captain Bull decided to run the ship ashore in full sails. They didn't make it to the shore, but the ship was firmly grounded 300 feet from land. They had to wait to the night as the storm raged, and in the morning, when the winds abated, they made it safely to the shore.
The crew, 25 sailors, found boarding places among the settlement, and there must be a kind of speech confusing because there were lots of languages there, starting with the Norwegians.
Good morning, can we have frokost? I mean, can we have breakfast?
There were Spaniards too.
Buena dia. Ay, hombre, it's cold here. I miss bento much. Ay, it's too cold here.
And even Tahitians.
Hoorana, everybody. Cool, Mom. How's the music here?
And there are still tons of relics of the ship to be found in the old homesteads of Cavendish. Now let's check out the sea bottom. On the east coast of Canada, we will find more than 15,000 sea wrecks. So there's a lot to explore. Oops, little friend, don't mind me, I'm out of here. Hey, little fellow, you look pretty friendly. Can you tell me where I can find some cool shipwrecks? Just whisper it in my ear. Oh, thanks. Have a good trip.
No worries, dude. Just follow the stream and watch out for the sharks. See you later.
The wreck of the Marco Polo was found by Tommy Gallant in 1980. He was a fisherman of Stanley Bridge and he found it in the Gulf of Lawrence, just near Cavendish. With so many wrecks, there is always something what will catch the eye. And sometimes, when the tide is low, you just see the remains on the beaches.
And we can go on for another few hours with watching wrecks, but duty calls, and we have to finish a painting. Now, let's end this story with the thought that the sea takes and gives. However, he took a lot the last few hundred years. In Holland we say, the fishing has cost a lot, or in good Dutch, de vis wordt duur betaald. And this is a kind of metaphor. It has not only to do with fishing, it means that every heroic voyage and adventure came with a high price, as the sea is and was a dangerous environment. Let's continue with the painting, and we can set up a very light sea with a bluish purple. There will be a lot of light reflections on this part of the painting, right under the sun that is, and more darker reflections on the left side. On that same left part, the light is fading away, so the reflections of the big clouds above it will need some darker colors. And we can do this with a darker bluish purple, maybe with a bit of dark grey. And with a soft, clean filbert brush, we can fade it all in. Now we have a nice foundation to float in, but we need some more fire in the sky. With a highlight, we can place the sun around here, and we can paint some silver linings on the clouds. Further upwards, the light loses its power, so we can add more orange. The silver linings are always fun to do. It brings the life into your sunset. And see how much you want to do? And if the underpaint is dry, then we can use our pinky to fade it out into the dry underlayer. This is a real nice technique, but you have to use your pinky. It is the one with the right pressure. For the light higher up in the sky, we can add an ochre tone to the highlight to brush it down a bit. And in the ochre mix I added a bit more alizarin crimson than usual. And see how much red you want to add. I mentioned this before in my episodes with sunsets. Every human being has a different opinion about orange and reds. For one viewer it can be way too red, and for the other it can be way much more aggressive. Ladies and men see it totally different. As ladies have more cones in the eyes, I told you this before. And this is the reason that the old masters were not too fond of making sunsets, as most of their clients were city inhabitants and they never saw a proper sunset. So go for your own feeling, it's your little world. The inhabitants of Arizona and Utah and other desert places, however, they have the real fantastic sunsets. Because of the dust that's floating in the air, the colors are absolutely incredible and almost surrealistic. And here comes the fun part, reflecting the lights into the sea. First, we straighten up the horizon line when necessary. Then we fade a light range of orange into the wet underlayer. Very soft, very soft. And no pressure. On the left, a bit more darker reflections, just a few here and there, and fade it in again with a soft, clean filbert brush. With a highlight tone, we wiggle under the sun to make a light path, and with a clean filbert brush, we fade this path in with light crisscross brushstrokes. Now let's do it one more time, because I want a bit more reflection. Same trick, we're going down and crisscross, fade it in or fade it out. On the left we can make it a bit darker, just for the effect. And then with a very small brush, a very small round brush, and an even darker purple, we can paint a few far away upcoming waves. And we won't paint big rolling breakers, just small little ripples, as the weather is calm and we have a high tide. Just some movement in the sea is enough. However, where the water reaches the first sandbank, we can do a small row of low breakers with the lightest tone of phthalo blue and white. So far so good, but before we continue, I think it's better to create the big blank wet sand plate first. First, let's make a foundation in light orange. We use the big 1-inch brush and make wide brush strokes. And don't forget to dip it into the medium. On the right we brush a few strokes of the sky phthalo blue reflection and do the same on the other side. After that we're gonna bring in some purple, and yes, be advised, it's gonna look weird. But at the end, it will all come together. And as this is gonna take a bit of time, let me tell you about Captain Bully Forbes. Why was his name Bully? Well, he made a voyage to Australia, and Australia had a gold rush going on in that time. So Captain Forbes was afraid his crew would desert him joining the gold rush. So one day they were in a harbor and the crew went to the pub, they said. And he didn't trust it, so to prevent his crew from deserting, Captain Forbes took them ashore in irons. Now what a strange sight must that have been to see a chain gang of crew hands going into the pub for a drink. So since that day his nickname was Captain Bully Forbes. And something else happened, something strange, during a long voyage over sea. The island sailor Jack Bates shouted to Captain Forbes just before he passed away after an accident, "You big bully, for putting me a change and being the cause of my untimely end. I shall place a curse on you and the Marco Polo. You bully, you shall die by your own hand, and this fine ship which you command will be shipwrecked on the coast of Prince Edward Island." Captain Bully Forbes just laughed about his event and turned his back to the dying sailor. But curse or not, later the Marco Polo was indeed shipwrecked on the coast of Prince Edward Island. And on a voyage to England on his new ship during a heavy storm, Bully Forbes jumped overboard and was never seen again. Some sailors on board of that ship swore they saw the famous ghost of Davy Jones dragging the hated captain down to his locker under the sea. Or maybe they helped Davy Jones a bit by kicking the captain. Well, we will never know. Now isn't that a nice ghost story about a bully captain who lost everything, even his life? And in the meantime, you could be watching me filling the wet foundation for the wreck of the Marco Polo lying in the wet sand. And with the palette knife I made a light path for the low-hanging sun, just with some highlight. And with some highlight I mean titanium white with a small drop of cadmium yellow. This is special for all the newcomers who watch this show for the first time. Then we can finish the sea with some small waves, and just before the bank we can do a few breakers with the lightest phthalo blue color. On top of that foam we can paint some highlight too as the sun hits it with its last lights. It's time to have some fun with a palette knife. With a small roll of paint on the edge, we let the palette knife dance over the wet underlayer. No pressure, just let it scratch. Hold it with 3 fingers, then you don't have any pressure. Then below we can use a darker phthalo blue color, and it will fit fine with the purple wet floor underneath. And we can do the same on the other side, but right under the sun part we can go lighter, and I would use a highlight tone then, and maybe with a bit of orange. Then the lower part I want it a bit darker. Let's see what we can do about that. We can add a bit black to the purple and blend it softly in, and I think it will work out fine. And if you ever need some help with this technique, you're always welcome in our beautiful lesson center in Qualicum Beach. Let's take a little break and enjoy. Before we say goodbye, I would like to show you our Academy of Music and Art in Qualicum Beach. I teach there music and art, and my wife Els card making and scrapbooking. I would love to show you my paintings just to get some inspiration, and I understand that for a lot of you Qualicum Beach is not next door, but if you happen to be on Vancouver Island, just hop in for a chat and take a look around. And of course you are always welcome if you need some advice about materials, maybe color mixing, or whatever you want to know about art and music. My sweet wife Els is a magician with paper, and she shows a great selection of scrapbooking and paper art. And don't forget that we offer a wide range of courses in music, painting, scrapbooking and card making. Yes, there is a whole new world, a whole new creative world for you right at your fingertips. Our steady viewers might know by now that I love to support the North Island Wildlife Recovery Center in Arrington with my paintings. This place, founded by Sylvia and Robin Campbell, is a lovely retreat for wounded birds and other animals who need recovery and help. Also a lovely place for inspiration. So if you ever visit the island, take a look in the center and admire all the wonders of nature. Enjoy! Yes, the Recovery Center is always a great place to get inspiration, to sketch animals or just sit and walk and relax. This summer we will do some more filming over there to see what's new, and we will show you this in the new episodes. In the meantime, we painted a bit more foam on the edge where the waves are breaking. We keep it all small because it's far away, but it's there, so let's not forget it. And now it's time to find a place for the wreck of the Marco Polo, although what is left of it. Painting an ugly, dark monster in your clean, beautiful painting takes a bit of courage, but keep in mind that even the most ugliest piece of wood has a certain beauty, so let's go for it. With a small round brush and a mix of black and burnt sienna, we start laying down some pieces of wood in the mud which was once a part of the bottom of the Marco Polo. Right on top we can paint a bit of grey to make the poles more 3D. Perspective wise, we're gonna staple up the bottom of the ship, although what is left of it. And because we are looking straight into the sun, it's more a silhouette, but there is enough to see. And we can sure play nicely with light and shadow effects into the wet sand. Let's take a closer look. From this point we can paint a bigger piece of wood, but will be standing up a bit more. It's amazing how wind, rain, salt and local sea life can make real sculptures of these old pieces of wood. And the longer it's lying there, the more beautiful they become. Now let's paint a bigger piece. We have enough small ground blocks in front, so this one will be more uprising. Let's go a bit higher on the left side, just for the perspective impression. And I'm still working with a small round brush. And like I said, we go a little bit more up here, let's say until here, and I think that's enough. Right away, we give the piece a light grayish tone and let it melt into the wet underpaint. Wet and wet will always result into a great natural effect. On the left, it catches more highlight. And if we are brave enough, and we are, we even can use the palette knife to scratch some highlight effects into that old wood. Now let's step back for a good overlook. The next piece will be low to create a more dramatic effect, and after that we can paint a bigger piece, and so on and so on. It gives us a good oversight how a tall ship was built in those days. This was not an easy job. We have to consider that there were no computers, no electronics, and often it was guesswork. But very good guesswork. The main carpenter or the opera boss was informed how long the ship had to become, let's say 400 feet, and he started taking steps in the sand from start to end. If he had small feet, the ship was shorter. If he had big feet, his ship was longer. Yes, you already guessed it. The main man should have a good understanding of the wood also. The wood to use to build the ship. Often the African hardwood was used, known as Iroko, which is the most durable wood in the world. It is hard like concrete and even resistant to light cannonballs. And like I said, guesswork or not, those carpenters were the best tradesmen in the world. And they knew how to build a ship. And after the captain, the ship's carpenter was during the voyage the most important man on board. Maybe the most important man, because if there was something wrong, and there was always something wrong, the carpenter had to do his repairs. And there was always a leak or a door or a damaging. Sometimes during a battle, a piece of the mast had been shot away, and usually tall ships had a spare mast, but I can tell you that it was not easy to replace a mast in full sea with no cranes, only the manual power of the hands. And after a long voyage of maybe 2 or 3 years, which was usual in those days, the ship began to leak more and more. And the hands needed to caulk the body, but how do you do that in full sea? If there was no decent harbor available with cranes and tools, the captain chose a sand plate outside the coast, which was pretty stable and big enough. When he was happy enough with it, he gave the order to let the ship run up on the bank in full speed. It was completely emptied of all heavy stuff, including cannons, and laid on his side. And that was easy said but not easy done, considering it was all done by man and by hand. And then the caulking began. The old stuff was carved out with knives and irons, and then the new caulk was brought in by hot tear and driven in between the planks. And if the ship had the bad luck to travel in the tropics, it must have been a terrible job in, let's say, 45 degrees in the hot sun, and pretty dangerous too. So the man worked from early sunrise to late sunset. Then it had to dry and then turn over the tall ship on his other side. And then the whole work started again. The work might have taken a week, and all the time the ship was lame as a sheep. And if a pirate ship showed up during this period, they were chanceless. But some clever captains put a circle of cannons around the ship with the gunners ready to fire on everything what was approaching. And there were indeed stories of captains who were able to defend themselves this way and save the ship and crew. So who said that the seaman's life was romantic and great? Well, if you think about all the difficulties, dangers and cruel adventures which was usually on a trip in those days, you probably will think twice. And this is why Captain Bully Forbes put his crew in chains when they went to the harbor pubs, because he knew they would run away when they had a chance. But the poor boys, they had no chance. And that's why they hated that bully captain. And therefore, that was his nickname, Bully Forbes. In the meantime, I decided to paint a few rocks under the water, and we made a darker underground, and with a lighter tone of ochre and grey we can paint loosely a few stones in the wet paint. And yes, we have to do this wet and wet, otherwise it doesn't work. With a small brush we give the shapes a dark edge, and we don't have to do this very precise, and then we fade it softly in. And pay attention, if you go over it with the fluffy brush, do it without any pressure. Otherwise you spoil the effect and your stones are gone, and then you have to start all over again. Let's have some fun with a knife. With a small roll of bluish purple paint on a knife, we can scratch some ripples over the water. Don't push, don't press, just let the knife dance over the wet paint. On the other side we can do exactly the same, but a bit lighter, as the sun is more at present on this side. So first we make it dark again with a purple bluish tone we used before. Then we paint some light and dark stones, give them a dark underline, and we start fluffing it again. I had a lot of requests of my students for stones underwater, so here they are, stones underwater. It's really too easy. Everyone can do it. And like I said before, if you need help, just drop me a line or come by in our beautiful lesson center. If you think you got enough stones, we can do a few more ripples with a knife. And let me think what we can add more on that big shiny sandbank over there. But before we do this, I almost forget to reinstall a few faraway mountains or hills on the horizon. During the overpainting of the sky they disappeared, so let them bring back. With a very light purple and a small round brush we can do this pretty easy. On photos of the Cavendish coast I saw a lot of small, rough, pointy rocks like these on the first sandbank, and these rocks were probably the reason that the Marco Polo was ripped apart after the stranding 300 feet before the coastline. And with a combination of black and burnt sienna we can paint a few of those mean rocks, who became the end of many a ship on that coast. And I gave them with light orange a bit of light. With the same color of that orange and a bit of the dark mix, I gave them right away a mirroring in the wet sand. And over that, to do a ripple, I used the blue or the phthalo blue lightest tone. And this will separate the stone from his reflection. Let's do one more, and maybe you have noticed that I followed the diagonal from the sea line right up down to the left corner below, and this will lead the eye from the spectator to the wreck. And this technique was an important item during the time of the famous Dutch masters, and certainly painters like Andreas Schelfhout were strong believers in following these important techniques. And if one of his students had the courage not to follow his orders, or maybe forgot it, he could expect a strong reprimand from the big master. And let's say he was not very polite or patient with his students, or more said, workers. They worked for him as an underpaid employee, and in our time we would call them modern slaves. However, in those days it was an honor to work or to be a so-called student by a famous master. You started with cleaning the brushes, sweeping the floor, mixing and making the colors, and then you were allowed to prepare the canvases, which is a hell of a job. And after a lot of those dirty tasks, you might be allowed to do some underpaintings for the master. And if the same master agreed, you were allowed to paint some backgrounds or maybe even more. And yes, it sounds all not so nice, but in those days the big master was in fact the CEO of a huge company which had to produce top quality paintings, and above all as fast as possible and a lot. Because clients were standing in line by the famous masters, and they had no clue that sometimes the master only put his autograph under a painting made by students. For instance, the famous master Rembrandt made in his life 300 paintings, 300 etchings, 2,000 drawings and more. He would never have been able to do this without his students or co-workers. So yes, in fact, these ateliers were factories and made tons of money. But if you completed your time by a Dutch master and you did your still life as an examination which was approved by a board of masters, your future was assured. You started your own atelier and you could make a very good living as a commercial painter. In the meantime, I painted a bunch of rocks the same way as the others, and at last we can paint some highlights on the rack. We can start with a bit of very light orange and upon that a good highlight. And we can do some highlights in the sea where necessary. And I know it's a bit over the top, but I couldn't resist to paint a sailboat sail in the distance, only the sail and a bit of the flag. And even worse, I love to paint a few simple birds in the sky with the same purplish color. Now put your sunglasses up because we are ready with this sunset. Have fun and enjoy.
Okay, kids, I think everybody is gone. Usually the rats leave the sinking ship first, but we are smarter.
You little father children, come on, march, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Yeah, kids, come on, let's see if we can find another ship with loads of Gucci's.
Hey Mom, is it still far? Are we there already? I got sore feet.
Mom, I have to pee. Yeah, you can be on the way. Now keep walking, you hear?
Oh, here. It's not easy to travel with us kids. Now watch the next show. I'll be back.
And this was the gruesome story of the Marco Polo. However, with a good ending, because nobody drowned, all hands survived, and the good people of Cavendish gave them shelter. Till the next time, check out our website and keep on painting!